Do you believe America is the good guys? Are we fighting for the right thing?
I mean,
I
I
think
open that up to
I
both of
think
you.
I would like to start with this one because I feel like it could give something Michael to respond to. But I don't think there's necessarily a good guy and a bad guy. It's very black and white. To Americans, you'll see yourselves as a good guy, but then there's a lot of countries that won't. And I feel like Australia is one of the countries that possibly do. But I feel like American interventionism is the cause for a lot of destabilization in a lot of regions in the world. So I don't know, like there's a lot of Central American, South American countries and Middle Eastern countries that are just fully destabilized, and you've got the terrorist groups that America funded during the Cold War to overthrow their governments and all of that. And it's just, I feel like they're all fighting them to this day, and it's so messy. But I feel like there's no definitive bad guy and there's no definitive good guy, in a sense.
I mean,
Michael, your response?
Maduro, I mean, the Taliban, I mean, Yemen, I mean, it's just far right, fundamentalist Islams, countries after country, in the Middle East. And I know David likes to make the oil point, and I know we've all made the joke in our lives, and it's funny, haha. But at the end of the day, America having energy independence and America being the global superpower that it is a good thing. And while David says, it destabilizes these countries, that's true. I mean, but what is there to begin with in these countries? There's no,
for example, they could be exporting their own materials.
I gave you your time. Look, there's
Mr.
no
President, let him speak.
All right,
Mr. President, let him speak.
There's no free and fair elections. There's no capitalist marketplace. There's no technology. There's no great living standards in these countries. It's the real GDP. Again, it's similar to China. It's an embarrassment. There's slave labor. There's slavery in those countries. Girls are still second-class citizens to men. So for sure.
But what's changed since American interventionism?
Look, let me just make this point. I'm all for raising immigration caps in America to make sure these people can make it safely to America and start a new life here. We need to get their country in wraps first, because we cannot trust those leaders in their country. But if we had access to these oil reserves, if we fixed the market, if we had more supply, so we could, even out demand, because there's always going to be too much demand for oil. If we were able to, lower prices for oil, think about in real terms what that would do for the economy, how we could invest in public schools, how we could invest in more corporate subsidies, how we could push the American economy forward. It just seems like, we got too overambitious when we went and we invaded Iraq, on false terms. But if we were actually serious with the American people and told them, look, here are the pros, here are the cons, these people could contribute to the American economy. I just read an article this week that the American economy could miss out on $3 trillion over 10 years for the worker shortages that we have. Like, seems like a no-brainer to me, but yes, America is a good force on the global stage, and the chance for these people to have a better life in America than the one they have now it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
But I think so. Those countries being bad, like those countries being third world countries and not having the infrastructure and all of that, that's due to, if you look at countries like Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and all of that, and then in Northern Africa and whatnot, they've been invaded and colonized by the British since basically they were able to get on boats and go anywhere. So you've already had multiple years of colonization, and then on top of that, you've had your corporations from the West come in and then take a hold of their natural resources, which they could be using to better themselves or that sort of stuff. Even though these countries do have bad political leaders? I don't doubt that. They absolutely do. But is that the fault of themselves, or what's the driving force behind these people coming into power? Whether it be the puppet governments that the United States set up and the West set up, even Britain and whatnot, be it the puppet states that they've set up, and then the terrorist groups that have either been funded by the USSR or the United States to overthrow these said governments. It's created a sort of power vacuum in these certain areas, and there's just it's going to be going on forever. It's sort of, I think, look, it's unfair for a company and for a country that's already developed to go into another country, take their oil resources, better their own country overseas with these resources and selling them, exporting them, whatever. And then, telling their people, hey, come over here because it's better. It's sort of what you were saying before with the states. If you don't like living in this state, move somewhere else. I think that's a very old-fashioned way of thinking, and it's more or less the tribal sort of, hey, if you don't like the problem in that cave, go live in that cave because they've got this going on. It's not simple, and there's no sort of simple way to sort of stabilize these areas without just letting them sort of.
I mean, that's the problem, the political leaders. There's no political capital to improve these countries.
But what has America done in the 60 plus years that they've been in these countries? They've just taken and they haven't given.
Tried to help, tried to establish democracy and not communism and not Marxism. That's clearly that's the problem. The leaders are bad. We can't leave the leaders to govern because they commit crazy war crimes.
But then these countries,
that America could only dream of.
Most of these Middle Eastern countries aren't communists. They're dictatorships, and that's
I know
the
they're
thing
fundamentalist.
Communism
Islam.
isn't a
Yes.
Communism isn't a
They're
leading
awful.
form. The leading form's a dictatorship. Whether it be a monarchy or a democracy.
Yes.
Capitalism versus communism. It's not communism versus democracy. And that's a completely different argument in itself.
No, because
these countries aren't communist. They haven't been communist. They've been under communist sort of invasion. Afghanistan had been invaded by the USSR before the United States. So, which doesn't even make sense because that's a form of imperialism, which goes against what the USSR wanted. So
the thing is, they don't have any institutions to even try communism. But I wanted to talk about Qatar for a second, because I mean, we've seen your whole response of, okay, don't let the US intervene. We haven't intervened in Qatar, and we actually let them host the World Cup. And I mean, Qatar had to globalize. It's pretty much the only thing it can do is sell its oil, right? Like you said. And we've let, a constitutional monarch reign power in there. And we've seen, when they constructed the stadiums in Qatar, the estimates from The Guardian was around 6,000 people died in those constructions.
Yeah, that's awful.
Women are still denied
better working conditions, because that's awful. That's
women.
critical.
Yeah, but those are the leaders that you want to keep in there, because they're not going to get.
I don't want those
because we need to establish democracy so we can get the bad leaders out of there. That's the whole point of America. And look, this is with
That's
Qatar.
The whole point of America.
Well, look, Qatar, women are still treated second. Look at the LGBTQ protests that happened during the World Cup.
I agree with you. You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir.
Shirts were ripped off of players. Who knows what they do to their own citizens if they're doing that to world-class.
You're preaching to the choir. This is exactly what I'm saying. These people no. What it is, it's different. It's so the United States is. It's I don't want these governments in power. They're not for the people. I feel like the people themselves should be funded. These people themselves should be.
But these people don't have civics class. They don't know how to govern. They haven't had the access to education that other Western countries have. Look at the literacy rates in some of these African countries that you want these leaders to take over in. We're talking like 30% for most of them, for men.
It's not these leaders, though.
Nonetheless,
Stop saying these leaders.
women,
I don't want them in power.